Hi, welcome to Tea with Mali. Today we're here with Ian Altman of Grow My Revenue, and he's also an international speaker and a renowned author. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I don't know about renowned, but thanks for having me here.
Thank you. I want to start the show by talking about your inspiration. Why did you start your business? What is Grow My Revenue, especially the revenue part?
Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of my background,
Yes,
explain
please.
kind of the journey of how I ended up here. So I started my first company in 1993, and we were like an IT consulting company, help people with the business challenges that they were facing as well as technology issues. And we developed pretty good success pretty quickly. So we were a Fast 50 company by 1998. In 2005, a group of investment bankers out of New York ended up acquiring my business, and then we helped grow that business from about $100 million in value to well over $1 billion in value. The interesting thing in all that, though, was that the thing that was most fun for me was friends of mine would be struggling in their business, something else would be going on, and they'd say, hey, can you give me a hand with this? And I would drop whatever I was doing to go do that because it was way more fun than building my own businesses. And I realized all of a sudden, you know what, that's what I really enjoy doing, and that's what I do with Grow My Revenue is I go and work with businesses on finding areas and opportunities where they're not necessarily growing and how they can grow better.
Now, let's step back a little bit. You said IT. I'm just curious, how did you get into IT in the first place? Did you fall into it? Was that a track, like a goal of yours to work in the IT field?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it was just kind of a function of growing up in a certain time frame. When I went to college originally, I was a pre-med student. And I did really well in chemistry, but I hated it. I remember going to a guidance counselor and said, so how much chemistry do I have to study to become a physician? And they said, all of it.
Wow.
And I said, what else you got?
Wow.
And then I started getting involved in business, and technology was always really easy for me.
Okay.
But my background was such that I used to work with companies more on the business problem they were trying to solve and then apply the technology to it. There used to be this huge gap, and there still is in some cases, of misalignment between what a business needs and the technology side.
Wow.
And so we kind of bridged that gap early on when I guess other people weren't doing it as much.
I didn't know this about you, and you didn't know this about me. I was pre-med as well.
Oh, yeah?
And when I hit biochem, the same thing happened. I went to study business and marketing. Okay, so Grow My Revenue, you help businesses really reach that, whatever goal it is in terms of growth. When you talk about sales and business development, that's the area that you really focus on. What motivates you to focus specifically on that area when it pertains to growing revenue?
Because it's the area that's probably most important for all businesses. You know, they often say that if your top line is growing, you can make up for a lot of mistakes in other areas of your business. So when businesses are thriving and growing, that's fantastic. I also see a lot of companies that have great ideas. Individuals that have amazing ideas, but they can't communicate it in a way that the buyer gets inspired or engaged. So people have great things how they could help people, but the other side doesn't know how it would impact them. So that message kind of falls on deaf ears. There's also a huge disconnect that I've seen over the years between buyers and sellers. If you think about it, almost every book that's ever been written about sales either uses a metaphor of a battle or game, okay, or war. Okay, so it's either a game metaphor or war, which means you're either implying there's a winner and a loser, which a game has, or in the case of war, the loser dies. And then we wonder why there's an adversarial relationship between buyers and sellers.
That's a great point. And when you talk about buyers and sellers, you're also big on really focused on value-based versus pricing. Can you go a little bit deeper on that for me?
Sure. So what I often tell people is this: if you sell and win based on price, then at some point down the road, you're going to lose that same client because of price. Mm-hmm. So if you tell somebody, oh, I can save you 10%, and they shift you and you think you did something great, later they're going to come back and say, oh, someone else will do it for 3% less. And eventually you get to the point where nobody's making any money. And if you're not making money, you can't well serve your client. Instead, if you focus on where you add the most value, then that client is never going to leave you, because if you're delivering value for them, then they kind of think to themselves, wow, this is a bargain. Whatever I'm paying is a bargain.
How do you get leaders? How do you get executives? How do you get the top-notch executives inside a corporation organization to understand that? I mean, profitability, value, when you go in and speak, is it challenging to have that conversation, or do most executives get it?
Well, it's interesting that you asked. So this notion of basically, how do I get the executives to figure it out? Well, if I just told them, then they won't believe it. So I actually take them through an exercise, and oftentimes with executives, when I'm speaking at an event, I'll ask people, okay, how many of you feel that price is the number one concern of your clients? Almost everybody raised their hand. Then I ask them a question. I say, okay, all things being equal, you have something really important for your business. Who are you most likely to do business with? A, the person who's your longest time friend who you know the best. B, the person who is the least expensive. Or C, the individual who best understands your situation. And I've done this with over 1,000 CEOs and executives, and they always say C. They always say it's who best understands your business. And now they have this great epiphany, and they realize that they're kind of cynical, because either they're the only people in the world to think that way, right? And gee, everyone else is just focused on price, or it's what I often say, which is price matters most when the person selling it believes that price matters most.
That's great. Now, how do you then translate that into teaching the business developers? And I know it starts also with executives and the vision from the top, but at the same time, what happens when you have a team of business developers and salespeople who are just trying to make a quota?
Yep.
They're scared, they're fearful, they've got this job they have to do.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple challenges with that. Oftentimes, leaders tell their salespeople, hey, we're not hitting our numbers. So I want you to go out and I want you to have more meetings and deliver more proposals. And the salesperson's thinking, whew, man, I'm lucky. I thought you needed me to grow revenue. If you just want me to have meetings and proposals, I can do a ton of that. Okay? So one of the things we have to help them realize is that they can actually do more by being better focused on the right opportunity. So I case study a number of companies in the different books I've written that have, in some cases, more than doubled their growth rate while pursuing fewer opportunities. So one of the companies actually pursued 40% fewer opportunities and doubled their growth rate. Now, the way we do that is we get people to focus first on your value from the customer's perspective. When executives are making decisions, there's a very simple thought process they go through, and I've done research on this, that basically, I've asked this question to 1,500 executives. Someone from your team comes, they want to spend money on this thing. What are the 5 questions you need to have answered in order to make an informed decision? And then in teams, we have them reduce that down to 3.
Okay.
You probably want to know what the 3 questions are, don't you? Okay.
I do.
So the 3 questions are, the first one is, why do I need it, or what problem does it solve? The second one is, what's the likely outcome or results? Not what does the salesperson say, because unfortunately, we usually don't believe the salesperson, but what's the likelihood? And that's why people ask for references and things like that. Then the third one is, why should I buy it from these people instead of somebody else? Ironically, that becomes the least important because the vendor who they feel best understands their situation and can explain why they need it, what problem it solves, and the vendor they feel is greatest likelihood of delivering results, that's the vendor they pick.
Why is number 1, that question, the first question, so critical? And I know this is a philosophy, this is your thing, this is what you teach all the time and talk about. Why is that so critical?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the way I came up with it is by doing the research. So I talked to 1,500 CEOs and executives who all came up first with, why do I need it? What problem does it solve? So the reason why they tell me it's so important is because, look, there's all sorts of things that people would love to have in our business. I want to know what happens if we don't buy it. Why do we need it? What's the problem that this is going to solve for our business? Because if you can't tell me that, then why should I spend the money on it? And too often, people in sales, whatever you're trying to sell, they focus on what they do rather than why people need it. And the problem is when you do that, you extend the sales cycle because eventually the customer has to translate whatever gobbledygook you're saying into what makes sense for them. So instead, if we focus on what's the problem they're trying to solve and what we're good at solving, it changes the whole dynamic. And now those people say, oh, I know exactly why I would need what you do. And you know what? We don't need that right now. That's not a bad situation. That just means the timing isn't right for you to work with that person right now.
So at Grow My Revenue, what is the problem that you solve? And how has that truly benefited the organizations that you worked with?
So there's a few key areas that people come to me on. One is that they've got a great message, but it falls on deaf ears. So their inferior competitors are getting more attention than they are. The second one is that their people are always convinced that every deal is about price. And I would argue that it's never about price unless the person selling it believes it's about price. And the third side is that their sales cycles are taking too long. They don't know if they're getting the right business or if any deals are going to close or not. They just, it's kind of like they just hope and pray that things are going to happen for them. By getting people to focus on, in essence, the problems they solve and really understanding that, then they know which types of clients they can have the greatest impact for. So there's a process that we take people through that identifies where have you had the most success solving problems for your clients. And then I've been very fortunate that, and I can have all the ideas in the world, but if people don't actually have the discipline to execute these things and make it go forward, then it doesn't matter. So the successes that I've seen are more attributed to great clients who take stuff on and really take it to heart. And in those cases, I've got many examples of companies who have doubled their growth, doubled their revenue, doubled their sales, however they measure it over a short period of time, all by pursuing fewer opportunities, which is the key. If you just pursued twice as many opportunities, sure, you could do that by adding a whole bunch of salespeople, but that's not really the best way to grow strategically.
Okay. So the programs that you offer, I do want to talk about that. When organizations come to you and they say, help us, what type of programs do you offer? What kind of programs do you put them through? Well,
there's a few different things. So I work with clients in a few different ways. There's actually a small set of customers, about 5 per quarter, I work with on a strategic basis. We really kind of take a step back in their business and figure out what they should be going after, what are the right types of strategic pursuits, and then how they can grow their business based on that. So that's one side. I also do a lot of work with companies where I deliver keynote addresses all around the world. I just came back from 3 weeks in Europe, speaking all around the UK, and then I also deliver workshops for companies to kind of change the thinking of their teams. Oftentimes, the greatest resources companies have are their non-salespeople in the organization, but those people all feel like sales has no integrity. So when people say, "Oh, will you help us grow the business?" They're like, "I'm not doing that," because they don't have like a loud plaid sport coat, and they're not gonna deceive people, so they don't want to do that. And once we show them that actually effective sales is about helping your clients solve things for themselves better than they can do themselves, then they become way more receptive, and they go, "Wow, okay, yeah, I guess I could do that. So I don't have to be a slimy person selling people stuff they don't need. No, I guess that's okay." And so one of the case studies is of a company that grew dramatically, and they hired 0 salespeople and engaged their non-salespeople to grow revenue. And that's always rewarding to me because now those people are more valuable to the organization. Since they pursued fewer opportunities, people had more time to spend with their families. It was like just this great balance for everything. And of course, everyone in the organization is financially more stable and successful, so their stress level's down. It's like people love working there. And that's very rewarding when you see that.
And I really admire that message that you bring with your company and with your keynote, really focusing on the value and what you have to offer in that sales role. I used to be in sales, I still do marketing, but really in that business development and sales role. And it was very difficult for me when I first came out to be the typical salesperson. They would send me to sales school and they would tell me this is what you do, and it's all about making sure that you sell the product or the service in the best light possible, and I could never bring my personality to the table. And so I know that there's a lot of challenge around people and the perception of sales. And so as you go around the world and you talk to corporations inside and letting them know that sales is really about service, true service to the people that you want to benefit.
It absolutely is. Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that I tell people is that effective sales is not about persuasion, it's not about coercion, it's about getting to the truth as quickly as possible. It's about finding opportunities where you're really the best person at solving something that's important for that client to solve. Because, for example, in what you do, you've got clients you could help dramatically if they're ready and in the right mindset to get there. And if they're not, no matter how talented you are, you can't get them there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you go and travel the world, and these organizations bring you on board to shed some information, intellect, whatever, what are the most popular topics that are always, the same request? And I know that you go back sometimes because they can't get enough of Ian Altman. What are some of the keynotes that are most popular, and which ones do you enjoy most?
You know what? There's 2 key ones. One is that idea of engaging your non-sales people, because it's great when you get a room full of people who are not in sales. And they start off with their arms crossed and they're sitting like this, like, "Oh, I don't want to hear this." And by the end, all of a sudden, someone will come up to me and say, "I can do this." And then the most gratifying part is, 90 days later, 120 days later, I get an email from one of those people that says, I'm loving what I'm doing. I think I want to spend more of my time in sales. And all of a sudden they realize that it's integrity based. So that side is really rewarding. The other side, the other topic that I talk a lot about is aligned with the title of my latest book, which is same side selling, which is how do you get buyers and sellers on the same side of the table working collaboratively instead of in an adversarial position. And so it's that notion of making it so that you as the salesperson and the buyer are metaphorically putting a puzzle together to see if the pieces fit, rather than you trying to force fit something. You know, we often use this joke of it'd be like a shape sorter, and you sit there and they've got a round hole and you've got a square peg, and most salespeople think, well, with a heavy enough hammer, I can make this work, and that's typically the way people have sold. And instead, you want to look and say, well, do we have a round peg? And if not, who does?
Right. Well, I definitely want to talk about your books as well, but before we get there, I also want to talk about speaking. Yep. Speaking because our viewers are people who are running their own businesses or interested in finding something that is their own to start or launch or, pursue. And I have a lot of people very interested in speaking. What lights you up about speaking? How do you find it to be impactful, and how did you get started with your speaking opportunities? Especially someone who speaks as often as you do all over the world. You're a great mentor to many.
Well, it's nice of you to say that. Hopefully I'm doing a couple things right in that area. Even when I ran my prior businesses, I always enjoyed speaking at conferences. And I think that if you think of speaking as teaching, it's just you're having a conversation with people and you're hoping to have an impact to change someone's life. If we can make it so that people are more comfortable in that buyer-seller relationship, if people are more collaborative, if there's less stress in their lives, then I feel like we're doing a good thing. And one of the best ways to do that, obviously, is writing is one way. Another way is speaking at events where you can get that interaction. Now, for me, I do some things that not everybody does, in that I don't care how big the room is, my program is going to be interactive. So I make people do stuff. I make them work. I engage the audience. I ask them questions. It's funny, I'll be in a room with thousands of people and I'll ask a question and no one will answer because they're thinking, well, it's a room this big, I'm not allowed to speak. I'm like, no, just throw them out there. And oftentimes I've got a flip chart and I'm like telling the cameraman, look, I need you to focus on the flip chart so everyone can see what we're writing. And it just makes it more fun, because I believe that when people attend a program, some are going to learn by listening, some by seeing, some by doing. Okay? And we need to address all of those, so that interactive part is really important. And the other thing is, my biggest guidance to people would be this. If you use slides, which are perfectly fine to use, I use them in almost all my presentations, just recognize that your audience can either listen to you or read what's on the screen, but they can't do both at the same time. So if you put a lot of words on your slide, then you either need to let your audience have the time to read it, and then you can explain something that's not on the slides. What I tend to do is I use images that convey an idea, and then I speak to that idea. And I find that way the visual learners, they get it all just from the image, and the people who are more auditory learners get it from listening, and that way you kind of hit everybody.
That's great. So over time, all of these opportunities globally do you get tired?
Oh yeah.
How do you make time to pause before the next engagement comes up?
You know what? I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of scheduling. So, for example, I spent 3 weeks speaking I was literally on the road for 12 days total. I spoke at 10 venues in 12 days. But then I made sure on my schedule I had nothing the following week.
I thought I was busy. Forget it.
Well, you know what? It was an interesting. I mean, to give you kind of a day in the life. So on this particular trip, I was spending the weekends in London. I have some good friends that live in London, so it was nice to spend time with their family. So it made it a little bit more tolerable, because it felt like I was at home. Then Monday, I would head to either a train station or airport, probably about 10 a.m. I'd get to wherever my destination was, go to the venue, check the audio, the technology, coordinate with the on-site people, all that kind of stuff. Eventually get back, shower, change, go to dinner. Still had to run my business, okay? Get to sleep midnight or something like that, meet people by 6 a.m. the next morning, do a workshop for a few hours, meet with people, before and after, and then by 1:30 we were done, and I was generally on a train to the next venue at 2:30. which ranged from 2 to 3 hours away, and I would do the whole thing over again the next day. So we did that leave Monday and come back Friday night every week while I was on the road. So it was a little bit of a crazy schedule, but it was really rewarding to hear people in different parts of different countries and how they react to this. So it was really a neat thing because you don't know how each different group is going to respond.
Well, you answered my next question is why do you do it? I mean, this happens all the time. I hear people who are very successful but very busy, and they get burnt out and they're tired, and then that's always a motivating factor why you back up or get on the train at 2 o'clock and do the same thing over again for a series of 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Beyond the satisfaction of it, I mean, what motivates you to keep going and pushing to be successful?
Well, the obvious answer is I'm not that smart. So if I was smarter, I'd figure out a different way to do it. No, you know what? I'm fortunate. I get to wake up every day and do exactly what I love to do. And so it's a great feeling for me when I get the skeptic in the audience that all of a sudden not only is agreeable, but is enthusiastic and says, I can do this. This is going to change my business. And the most gratifying thing for me is when I get the LinkedIn message, the tweet on Twitter, the email that says, I've started using this already and it's already transformed, the way we do business. That's really gratifying for me. And that's the part that's exciting. I mean, it's like I said, if I look back historically, it was always more fun for me to help other people grow their businesses than it was to grow my own. I mean, the initial few years of growing my businesses was really fun. And then I just didn't enjoy it. If I had known you better then, you would have said, Ian, stop doing this. Because despite the perceived success, I wasn't thrilled with what I was doing. I was just kind of doing stuff. And so now I absolutely love it. It's a blast. And I love going into a place where either you get somebody who's skeptical, oh, I don't think this is going to have an impact on the audience. Okay, we'll see. Right? And I've done this enough now that I pretty much know where in different programs, okay, I'm going to say this, and 2 seconds later, the whole room's going to be laughing. And that's kind of a cool thing.
It helps too that you're such a people person. It really, because every time that I see you enter a room, it's like people stop and say, "Oh, Ian's here," because that's what you exude. You are always very welcoming, and as a speaker, there's a charisma and charm that either gets developed over time or just naturally is within you to capture an audience like that. I mean, have you always had that charisma and charm? I'm going to call it that, whether you like it or not. Have you always had that even when you were younger, or did you develop that over time?
Well, coming from you, it's really flattering because you definitely have that effect. You walk into a room and everybody, I think you've met my wife once, yes. And she's like, "Oh, you're going to see Molly? Oh, tell her I said hi." Oh, and it's like, you just have that impact on anybody you meet.
She's amazing.
So for you to say that about me is very flattering. It's always been very easy for me to speak in front of an audience. And it's never been a struggle, and I don't know why that is. It probably has to do with my parents. My mother was one of those people who walked into a room and just lit up the room. Although she always had this great line that was, she said, everybody brightens a room. Some when they enter it, some when they leave. Right? But so she always had a positive outlook on things. It was funny because when you'd meet somebody who was nasty,
that's great.
And someone would say, "Isn't that person awful?" She would always say, "Remember, everybody brightens a room. That person, maybe by leaving it."
That is funny. When you talk about humor as well, because definitely that's a part of your charm too. Do you bring a lot of humor into the work that you do because it's corporate? It's a lot of, some of them are coming to the conferences or as an audience member, completely disengaged. They don't want to be there. They feel like they have to go to this thing. I mean, how do you use that in your everyday life and work?
You know what? I mean, it's very difficult for me to have any interaction without any humor because it's just kind of the way I'm wired. But my cautionary note to people who are getting into speaking is, look, you have to do whatever is you. So people will ask me, they'll say, well, should I use humor in my talk?
Thank you, yes.
And my answer usually is no. And people say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the fact that you're asking me means that you're not necessarily comfortable with being funny. So if that's the case, then you shouldn't do it. Now, I use it all the time, but it's just, I've got that sarcasm. It's just the way I'm wired. If someone said, well, you can't have any humor, I'd be like, well, I'm not the right person for your event then. because I'm going to do stuff that just, if something strikes me as funny, I'm going to say it. And maybe it's because, I don't have a governor up here that's saying, no, don't say that. And there's many times where I'll say something and later think, I don't know if I should have said that. But, fortunately, it usually goes over pretty well. But I think that it's important that people are comfortable in a room. I think that also, especially in a sales context, properly placed humor can help to disarm the other party and realize that you don't take yourself that seriously. I think sometimes people try to be funny. There's a difference between trying to be funny or telling a joke and using appropriately placed humor, and most of it in a presentation setting is self-deprecating humor. Because you can't necessarily beat up your audience, even though I do that from time to time also. So.
Well, I'm going to transition us from speaking to writing.
Okay.
The writing process for you, how does that work for you? I mean, when you first decided that you were going to write your first book, and we're going to talk about all of your books, because I know you have two that have been very successful, and are you working on a third one?
Not officially.
Not officially? Okay. Well, you can come back and tell us about that when you're ready.
Because if I said yes, then you would say when. But there's some things that I'm working on that I'll probably co-author another book.
Good. Okay. Great. Well, let us know about that, because we'd love to highlight that as well. Now, going back to your first thought of of writing a book, what was that like for you? Did somebody suggest it? Did it just one day you had an epiphany and said, you know what, I should probably author a book?
You know what? I was writing weekly articles. I mean, a lot of people call it a blog. I don't think a blog really captures it. I mean, we're actually converting everything on our site to what we call an online learning center. And so that's, because to me, that's more the message, is it's all about teaching. Too often, I think blogs, people write them, they're too self-serving. And instead, it's just, how can you share information that's going to help other people? And so on the book side, the first book I was writing actually isn't the first book that came out. It's not even the second book. So Upside Down Selling, which was the first book, was literally the first book I was writing was just taking too long. And there was too much I was trying to do. And I said, you know what, I need to get a book out there. So I'm going to write something else that's going to be shorter, and it'll be a placeholder. And then, of course, it hit number one on Amazon in 3 categories. And I realized that, wait, there's a secret formula here, which is salespeople and executives like short reads because we have short attention spans. So if you can read it in 30 minutes, wow, that appeals to that audience. And it was very impactful. So everything we put in there is, and here's how to put this to work. Here are the 5 steps you should have learned from this chapter. And it was just, it had strategic ideas, but then how do you put those into practice? So we got good feedback on that. And then I figured, okay, now I'm going to write the original book I started. And then I met Jack Quarles, and Jack has a company called Buying Excellence. And so he works on the purchasing side of the world. And obviously I help people on the sales and business development side. You would think we would have been arch rivals. But instead we realized that we were teaching people, in many cases, the same things from the opposite side of the coin.
Which you were talking about, the buyer-seller relationship.
Yeah. And so then we wrote Same Side Selling, that is geared towards getting people on the same side. But that first book, I'd love to say that that I knew exactly what I was going to write at the beginning. I didn't. It just I got lucky, and it turned out pretty well. And candidly, I took feedback from people on different articles that really had a big impact, and said, you know what, I'm going to collect those together with some other content, and that'll become the book. And nothing's verbatim. But it was just the inspiration for what's in the book was based on what people felt was most impactful in different articles they had read.
So how did you feel when you learned that you hit number 1 on Amazon? Was that surprising?
Surprising would be a great understatement. So here's the funny part, which just kind of shows how pathetic this is. So when it came out, I was actually giving a workshop to a company in New Jersey, and so we're taking a break. And so one of the guys says, hey, you hit the bestseller list. Okay, he's got his tablet out. He goes, hit the bestseller list. And I'm like, really? Okay, so during the break, I'm online and I searched, I looked at, because in Amazon, they group them in groups of 20. So I started at 81 to 100. All right, let's see if it's there. No, it's not there. Okay, let me go to 61 to 80. Okay, no, it's not there. 41 to 60. No, 21 to 40, it's not there. Must have fallen off the list. Just out of curiosity, let's see what's in 1 to 20. So I open it up and I see Upside Down Selling as number 1.
Oh my God.
And the first thing that went through my head, I kid you not, first thing that went through my head was, I can't believe it, someone else has another book with the same title. Because when you produce a book, your biggest concern is that there's another book with the same title.
Right.
And that's what's going through your mind the whole time before you launch it.
Oh my God.
And it was like, oh. And then I'm like, but not with my cover.
and my name, and that's when I realized it hit there.
Congratulations.
But it's
Wow.
I mean, it was just it was an interesting thing because I didn't think it would hit it, and it's really more a testament to the channel and network that I developed, and just like great friends and people who help promote it. Because if you think about it, in that first day or two, it's not like, I guess it was only 30 minutes, so maybe enough people could have read it, but it's not like so many people read it that they told people, oh, you've got to read this. It's more just the network that spread that news that got people to buy it in the first day or two. So,
Well, which is a perfect segue into my next thought, which is network, community, support. In the world of business development, in the world of business in general, and I know you have lots of advice for business owners because you are one and you ran a successful business, now you're helping a lot of different businesses. It's critical to have a strong network of people around you. Would you agree?
oh yeah.
Can you elaborate on your own personal thoughts about network?
You know what? I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. I mean, it's just, you know, we share many of the same friends who are just, you know, really your own virtual advisory board, if you will. And you know, in each of my books, I've got a list of people. Here's the people I'm thankful for, and you know, if I listed everybody, it would probably be longer than any book I've written. But it's getting that objective feedback from people, from in essence, riding along with other people who are going through similar things. There's a group in the Washington D.C. area called Cadre that I'm highly involved in, and in Cadre there are a number of speakers/authors in there, and we advise each other all the time. In fact, there's a program that I did earlier this year called the Remarkable Growth Experience. And it's a program I put on with two other people, Marcus Sheridan and Joey Coleman. So Marcus is kind of the inbound content marketing guru. And Joey Coleman speaks about something called the first 100 days. Basically, the premise is, in many businesses, most of their clients leave in the first 100 days. So if there's things you can do to engage your customers in the first 100 days, you can turn those people into raving fans who never leave. And so the idea of this conference was, and we call it an experience more so than a conference, was that how do you bridge the sales and marketing side, the content side, and the customer experience side together. And we did a 2-day event. We limited to 75 people and it sold out. So now we're doing it again in November. I think it's November 6th and 7th. Just outside of DC, and same sort of thing, we're limiting it to 100 people. The funny thing is, we picked the venue, and just on a podcast, I think Marcus said to somebody, oh yeah, and we set the dates, and all of a sudden we're getting these emails from people we've never heard of who said, well, I heard about this event before. So it's really cool. That's when you can have that great impact on somebody else's life if you get the right people. And we're really selective about who comes to it, because if you have one person who's not right in the mix, you talk about network, if you have the wrong person in your network, it can be as negatively impactful as if you have the right person, can be positively impactful.
Yeah. We'll take a quick break and be back on Tea with Molly.
Did you take your medicine?
Oh gosh, I forgot it.
Her nurse. You need a claim number? Her personal assistant. Let me just grab her housekeeper. Her cook. Her accountant. When I started taking care of Mom, I didn't realize the challenge of playing so many roles. But above all, I'm still her daughter.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving to connect with experts and other caregivers. Together we can better care for ourselves and the ones we love.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
I've come up with a family emergency plan.
What is it?
It's difficult to talk about, so I'm not telling you.
I'm so glad I won't have to remember anything.
Me too. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Welcome back to Tea with Molly. We're here with Ian Altman. Well, we talked about network, and of course I'm going to take it back to messaging and marketing because that's the area that I have passion for and that's what I focus on. When you talk about your message and your brand, how protective are you of that, or how strategic are you about your personal brand, through the keynoting that you do as an author, and then also as a business brand?
I tend not to be protective at all. I kind of have a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity. So, someone will say, oh, I was at this event and someone did that same exercise that you always do. And they said, oh, I'm doing this for the first time and I know they must have stolen it from you. What are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. It's flattering that someone else found that valuable. So I don't worry about that side of it.
But also knowing you, it's not necessarily that they stole it. It's probably you gave it to them because you give a lot. You give a lot. You say, use this, try this, and I hear you all the time.
Yeah.
And that's really important too when we talk about protection of our brand and competition. Is there such a thing when you really know that you're doing your work to serve a particular market? Well, we talk a lot about that on the show. Like your unique differentiator, and we have so many people to serve. Is there true competition? In terms of the exact thing that you do and can offer?
Well, I don't think there's a true 100% competitor for anybody's business. I think that, in fact, in many cases for my clients, let's say someone will have me do a keynote for their team and then several workshops. I'll often say to them, they'll say, oh, we get this other event coming up we want you to speak at. I'll say, you know what? Your team should hear from somebody else. Let me suggest a couple other speakers who can come in, because if you're truly focused on the outcomes for your clients, at a certain point, they're better off hearing a different voice than hearing the same voice over and over again. Part of the value in bringing an outside resource is that you're hearing a different voice with a slightly different message that might resonate with your team differently. So if people bring me in and I'm the same person over and over and over again, eventually I sound like an internal resource to them and I don't add as much value. The one thing that I also tell you is that from a networking standpoint, it's really important that for your network, you can explain to people why someone else would need you, what symptoms they may be experiencing that would be a reason why they could use your help. So for example, you could say to them, oh, we can help people on the marketing messaging, on the creative side, that's all fine, but why would they need it? Well, they would need it if this isn't happening, if that isn't happening, because remember, they're ultimately going to say, why do I need this? What problem does it solve? Well, if you can lead with that, then people know what problems they're seeking that you might be a good remedy for.
You talked a lot about how do you stay motivated to do what you do. Travel, speak all the time, and then you're tired. What allows you to stay engaged? Like, how do you balance all of the busyness, even though the passion is definitely there, we know that about you, with family time? Because I do want to bring that. I think that, we have a lot of successful business owners. We have a lot of successful executives. And successful meaning that they feel that they're doing a good job at work.
Yeah.
But how are you able to do a good job at home?
You know what, there's sometimes I wonder about that. Sometimes I think, like for example, if I'm away for an extended period, that's tough for me, right? But the reality is I rarely do that. It's more often that I'll be home for a couple of weeks and I'm gone for 3 days. And then I'll be home for 3 weeks and I'm gone for 2 days. And so it's more, I do a lot of things locally in the DC area. And up until this last trip to the UK, I think I missed one of my son's soccer matches in the last 3 years. Right? So part of why I changed what I was doing from a business standpoint is because I felt like I wasn't there for my family as much as I would have liked. So when I left the previous company, people said, what? Why are you leaving them? The company's growing, you're doing well, but it's just, there wasn't that balance, and I didn't have the passion about doing it. Now, right now, I love what I'm doing. Literally, people say, "Do you ever get nervous?" I say, "Yeah, I get nervous that the person introducing me is going to take too long." Right? That's the only thing I get nervous about. And literally, I spoke the other day, and someone had my whole bio off the from the press kit, and he said, "So, how would you like me to introduce you?" And I said, "Very briefly," because that's what concerns me. The balance on the family side is a matter of, anytime we can do things experiential for our children with my family, we take time to do that. And when I'm home, it's, I always make sure I've got time to spend with my wife. I always make sure that we have time to spend with the kids. And keep in mind, we have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. Our 15-year-old daughter, sometimes she may not want to spend as much time with us as we want to spend with her. But we're sure in time that'll change.
Yeah, and that also brings me to a question. What type of values do you instill in your children? Being the entrepreneur that you are, what types of things do you teach your children about life in general and also about entrepreneurship? Are they interested?
Our daughter, not so much, although she's in the process of writing a book. But for her, she's writing a book that's more a fictional book, and she's just a very talented writer, probably way more so than I am. Our son is absolutely very interested in business and entrepreneurship, and has that same type of gene. And so, for example, I remember we went shopping for beds. And so I was explaining to him, he says, well, how do we negotiate this? And I said, well, they don't train their salespeople very well. So we're going to flinch, and they're going to lower their price probably 30%. He says, well, what's a flinch, and why would they lower their price? And I said, well, I'll explain it to you. So we go to the mattress store, and this mattress salesperson comes over wearing a leisure suit, which I didn't even know they sold those anymore, but apparently they do. And he comes over and he says, so you're interested in this bed, which we'd been standing in front of? And I said, yes, how much is it? Even though there's a sign on it. And he says, well, it's $2,700. So then I demonstrated to Isaac what the flinch is. I said, $2,700, you're out of your mind. If anyone sold this for $2,700, they would put you in handcuffs and take you away. What's the real price? The guy looks around, he goes, well, we could probably sell it for like $2,000. And Isaac starts laughing out loud. This is like the funniest thing he's ever seen. He's like, this is perfect, right? And so the sales guy looks at him like, what's he laughing at? And I said, numbers make him laugh. Because it just seemed like a nicer thing to say than to say, well, he thought you were a fool. But it's just, so for him, he's always trying to learn about what this is, about business and things like that. The biggest thing that we tell our kids is, you do everything with integrity. And so that's like a consistent message, integrity, respect, integrity. It just goes back and forth, and we hope that it sticks. And what I always tell people is you want your children to behave amazingly when you're not there, because your children will do things that drive you nuts. It's just when other people say, oh, your kids are delightful, and you think to yourself, my kid? So that's part of the goal.
And what about community? What do you like to spend your time when you talk about causes? What things matter to you?
You know what? I mean, for me, there's a lot of. I mean, I spent time as president of a country club, which was a thankless community endeavor. That's like a different thing. For me, it's more finding the meaningful causes out there. So oftentimes, it's funny. I do 4 non-paid speaking engagements each year, and it's all for charitable events. So I don't do any other speaking engagements like that. But for those events, if I can help raise funds for something, but it always has to be something where there's a personal connection for somebody else. There's something that's more meaning, where it's not just some theoretical concept. And I think that oftentimes the easiest thing, like what we teach our children, is the easiest thing to do is write a check. The hardest thing to do is contribute your time. And so when I see our children take time away from spending time with their friends to volunteer to work with somebody who's disadvantaged or somebody who's disabled or something like that, that tells me, okay, we're doing the right thing, because it's too easy to write a check. And too often people focus on that aspect of it. I think it's more about giving time. So I work with, there's a group in Montgomery County called, I think it's Rebuilding Together. And so a couple times a year we go out and we help renovate somebody's home or fix up a house, and that's rewarding because you're out there working with tools, and it's a guy thing. There's a whole testosterone aspect to that, but we get to work with tools, and then starting next year Isaac will be old enough that he can come out too. So I think that kind of stuff, that hands-on stuff, is more meaningful. Not that you don't also need to help people financially, but I think that it's more impactful when you're actually there doing things, and it's rewarding.
Yeah. You talked also earlier about writing a book and co-authoring a book. I want to talk about collaboration as well, because when you're an entrepreneur, and I see this all the time, and I also have challenges with this as well and getting much better about it, is being able to not just sit in the silo or be on an island, right? We talk a lot about feeling connected or also feeling disconnected because you're in your head, you're trying to get this done and that done. I love collaborating. I love being able to have somebody else's gifts and talents and skill sets complement mine and do some projects that are meaningful for a broader audience.
Sure.
Talk about in the past and also currently when you collaborate, what are some of the things that you look for in a collaborative effort or in a partner?
So I look for 1 + 1 = 7. So 3 isn't enough. It's got to be a multiplier effect. So for example, when Jack and I wrote this book, it was a matter of, look, either one of us could have written a book, but having the perspective of both of us in there
create a huge multiplier effect, which gives people a lot of insight. When we did this remarkable growth experience, it was 2 of us could have done this, it would have been okay. The 3 of us together brought a perspective people weren't getting anywhere else. So I look for people that have a common vision, have a common mindset around what we're trying to accomplish. In other words, if I ask somebody, what are you hoping to accomplish with this? And they start by, here's how much money I want to make from it, it's not going to be a good collaboration for me. When I talk to somebody, for example, in this program, I talked to Marcus, and I said, so if we do this event, what are you looking for? And Marcus said, I want people 6 months later to say, wow, that was the best 2 days I ever spent in my life. That's when I knew, okay, we share a common goal for this. And then Joey said, well, 6 months isn't enough. I want to know that a year from now, they still look back on that day. And that's how we knew it would work. And each of us brought different talents to it. So it's got to be areas that are complementary. And I think that when you do that, it's critical to recognize where your expertise excels and where it doesn't. Because there are aspects of the content that, for example, in the Remarkable Growth Experience, Marcus, Joey, or I could cover. But there's certain aspects that we know and we respect each other to know that, you know what, they're the expert at this. So, for example, at this event, Marcus is probably the best known of our group. I mean, Marcus has got a huge following. And then it's probably me, and then it's Joey in terms of overall recognition and network and that sort of visibility. However, the event opened because we said, Joey, you should open the event, because his speaking style is stuff that we knew he would just engage everybody from the moment he started. And then at the end, it was, Marcus, we want you to close, because Marcus is the guy who will create that emotional connection for everybody. And someone said, will that bother you? I said, no, because this is what each person is best at. And, so when we plan out the event, it's a matter of where you can create the greatest impact for the audience so they get the most value. And if you're always focused on that level of impact and value for your customer and for your audience, everything else is easy. It's when you start worrying about things like, well, how am I going to sell them this? Then all of a sudden you're up there for your reasons, not for their reasons. The funny part is, if you go up there and you're focused on how can I deliver value for the audience and for my customers, the rest of the stuff tends to take care of itself.
Yeah. The process that you shared about really looking at all the different talents and gifts of each person, each partner in this project, it reminds me of being inside corporations, especially when I was in corporate and I worked inside a corporation, how much, well, at least how important it is to really recognize all of those unique skill sets of each individual person. And I go back into my sales days as well. We had a sales team in my first job. Everybody was gifted. They were very successful, but each one of us had our unique personalities. I was always the sappy one that everybody fell in love with. It was just like, oh, just send her, because I had this ability for people to trust me, but they always go straight to the heart. People cry with me, and the salespeople are like, man, you should just go ahead and be a therapist, with a sales sign on your shirt. But being able to have a leader that says, okay, so when we want to emotionally engage, we send this person, or we have this program that this person will lead. Does that happen a lot, or is that something that you're hoping to inspire, to really be able to, in the sales force, especially the non-sales people, to bring that to the surface?
You know what? I think that when you start focusing on what problems you're good at solving for your clients, then you find people on your team who have the greatest expertise in helping solve that problem. If you're just out there peddling stuff, then it's who gives the pitch better. Well, the problem is it doesn't matter who gives the pitch better, because no one wants to feel like they're being sold anyhow. So it becomes somewhat irrelevant. I think that a major challenge in this is that people need to have the confidence and humility to know what you're good at, and also know that even though you might be good at something, that someone else might be better at it. And so it's that you need to have enough confidence that you can sit back and say, okay, I'm deferring to them because I think they're going to do this piece better than I would. And without feeling like somehow you're deficient because of that, but then recognizing, look, they're better at this. And if they do this first, then I do that, the combination is going to be better than either one of us could have put together.
Well, when you talk about the confidence to know what your skill sets are, to really truly believe that you have something to offer, what would you say are your greatest assets and skill sets that you offer that you can confidently claim to be yours?
Probably the biggest thing for me is humility. No, just kidding. So that's, I steal that from our mutual friend, for our mutual friend Lowell, that says, my greatest skill is humility. But I always think that's funny. Anyhow, for me, it's the ability to take someone's description of what they do and within a few minutes, turn it into something that kind of transforms and engages the right audience for them. So it's taking a message that might otherwise have fallen on deaf ears and turn that into something that the right customers say, "Ooh, I want to learn more about that." And it's helping people discover what problems they're really good at solving, because what they usually answer at first isn't the real stuff. It's kind of superficial, and it's getting deeper to the point that you can really get a message that when the right customer hears it, they say, "Oh, I want to learn more about that." I had a client of mine who they had reached out to. They identified 21 accounts that they felt would be ideal for them. And they called and emailed all 21 with this message they had, and they got responses from exactly 0. And then we followed this formula that we cover in the book called Entice, Disarm, Discover. And we figured out, here's the problems that these 21 clients really would be experiencing or should be aware of. And we crafted into this other message. And then they reached out to the same organizations. They said, "Oh, we're going to do this whole campaign." I said, "Nope, just keep it fair. 1 phone call, 1 email. Let's see what we get." And within 2 weeks, they had 19 of the 21 contact them and said, "How soon can we meet with you?"
Fantastic.
Right? So it's really cool. That's gratifying for me, because the person who was in charge of these accounts, the salesperson, was under a lot of stress. They weren't hitting their numbers. They were concerned about their future of the company. And now, they're doing great. And that's the gratifying part of it. So that's probably the one thing, is that aspect of it. And the other area I got a lot of positive feedback on is kind of the natural language role plays. So to me, it's always a matter of, it's a conversation. It's not a debate. It's not a negotiation. It's just a conversation. And giving people the right phrasing for how to word things in a way that doesn't make the hair go up on the back of someone's neck, but instead they say, "Well, I'm comfortable and I can really trust what this person's saying to me."
Wow. What is your vision for Grow My Business, and also for yourself as a professional, as the leader of your organization? Where do you see the company going? Where do you see yourself going?
This is very much of a lifestyle business. This is a business that inside of Grow My Revenue, what we're trying to do is just make it so we have as much impact as possible on really as many people in the buying, selling area as possible. And when I started the business, I was thinking to myself, okay, how can I help people on the sales side? And I realized that if we didn't address how people buy also, then we were missing something. And that was kind of the motivation behind teaming up with Jack on this book. So really, it's a matter of continuing to expand that awareness around what we can do to help kind of that buyer-seller dynamic and that relationship between buyers and sellers to create more value on both sides of it. And as part of that, we'll start rolling out information products that make it so that, right now the challenge I have is that there's stuff that people can get that's basically free that I give away. There are books that are almost free. And then there's stuff that candidly is rather costly in terms of what I do. And we're trying to kind of fill the middle, because there are a lot of businesses that could benefit from what I do, where we're just trying to make sure that we can deliver as much impact on things that candidly aren't as big of an investment.
That's great. It's much needed, especially for the smaller growing guys, or the ones that have been around, but now they're taking a turn and rapidly growing, but they're still watching their budgets.
Absolutely. And part of what I see that really concerns me is there's a lot of people still in snake oil out there. So there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, here's this program, and for $5.99, here's what you get," and they're basically trying to sell some of their concept. And unfortunately, too often I see things that aren't really going to work anymore. And it's old school techniques, and it's deception and coercion. And I believe that if people sell with integrity, then they can feel pretty good about it, and they know they're making a good impact on their community, on their market.
That's great. Any final thoughts for business owners? Any words of wisdom you want to impart?
Yeah. Know really well what problems you solve for your customers. Understand how people make decisions, and then make sure that the way that you're speaking to them is about their issues and what's important to them, not about your stuff. Because there isn't anybody, for example, if you're a lawyer, no one's sitting around saying, what I really need is 12 hours of an attorney's time.
No one's thinking that. What they're thinking is, I have this important issue that I'm looking to solve. And if you can help me solve it, wow, that'd be great. The other thing I would say is that if you're in a business where you're selling your time, try to, as quickly as possible, get out of selling hours. Because you want to be selling results, not resources. When you sell resources or hours, basically what you're saying is, here's how much my time is worth. Okay? And it's usually a very me-centric viewpoint. Instead of, here's the challenge that I help people overcome, and here's what they tell me that's worth. Because really, if you think about it, if you help somebody make a major breakthrough in their business, do they want you to do that in as short or as long a time as possible?
Right, sure.
Well, as quickly as possible. So you're actually more valuable if you can help somebody accomplish that in a shorter time frame than a longer one. And unfortunately, when you bill by the hour, it's kind of, the more inefficient you are, the more money you make. And that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Very valuable advice, and I think that's sound advice for a lot of people who are trying to figure out what's the best pricing model for their worth and their value and their service. So thank you so much for being a part of Tea with Mali, being able to share so much great insight, especially around true value when it comes to your business, your service, and product, whatever it is that you want to provide to a community of people that you ultimately wish to serve. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Can you let us know how to reach you? Absolutely. The easiest way for me is everything circles back to Grow My Revenue. So on Twitter, it's Grow My Revenue. The website is growmyrevenue.com. And of course, the books are Same Side Selling and Upside Down Selling. Great. And I want to make sure that people get a chance to see what they look like so they can find it, or they can just pretty much Google Amazon, your name, right? Yeah, if you Google my name and you don't find me, then let me know. But it generally works pretty well. Great. Thank you again. Thanks, Molly. All right. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you next time on Tea with Molly.